Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the Tactile Knife Company, Rockwall. Not Rockwell, I'm probably going to say Rockwell at some point in time, but it is a wall of rocks in knife form. So, there we go. First off, though, in the name of full disclosure, I want to thank Tactile Knife for sending this guy along. I've actually worked with Tactile Turn, which is the same people, right, for a while in the review world, but when they said they were getting into knives, like, yep, I'm interested. But I told them, as always, I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, the ugly. Might be a gem, might be junk. They did still stand along. Nonetheless, we have to assume this is the very best quality controlled one of these guys ever, and I'm doing my best not to let that affect the nature and quality of my review here. Next thing, let's do some size comparison. This is not a particularly large knife. We'll start off actually by comparing it to a ruler. We're going to see the blade length here is just barely a hair over 3 inches if the cop really hates you, but otherwise, about 3 inches worth of blade overall. And then in terms of otherwise size, also known as regular size, here it is against the Spyderco Delica, as well as the Ontario Rat 2. So what we see here is more sharpened blade length, actually, than either of them, even though nominally the blades are about the same. And here it is against the Spyderco PM2, in this case, the River's Edge Cutlery, their ongoing exclusive sort of PM2, because that's the one I had available at the moment. So, anyways, there is that. Next thing, what the heck's a Tactile Knife? Well, Tactile Turn is a company that has been working for many years in the pen space, and I've been reviewing them for many years. Here's an example of one of their bolt-action style things. Here's the new slim version, and here is their brand new push-button pen, which is quite good, right? I'm a big fan of Tactile Turn as a pen-making company, and they have recently decided, you know what, let's get into knives, and this is, in fact, their very, very first knife. This is made by the same folks at the same location down there in Texas, here in the US of the A, and the price of the knife is $300. And then finally, a quick note. The RS here, many of them are numbered from the initial run of the numbered things, and rather than giving reviewers a very small number, because some people value that, they did RS, review sample. And so that's what we've got here. And then one final other note is that at a certain point in time during the process of having it for review, the Tactile folks messaged me and said, hey, Nick, can you send yours back? We'd like to adjust the detent a little bit. Basically, the review samples, which were some of the very first ones made, were not up to the standards they wanted, and so they wanted to send the detent back, or tweak the detent. And although it wasn't terrible to start with, it is way better now. And so I'm very glad that they went ahead and did that. So here we go. Let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting knife here. So on the good side, to start with, this is made in the USA. Now, of course, the quality is about effort, not geography, but I like seeing things being made in my home countries. I'm sure you do in yours, right? And especially when it's being made with a company with a great track record in the industry already, that's a beautiful thing to me. I like Tactile Turn a lot. They've done well by people historically in the gear world, so why not? I'm really glad to see that. It's nice to have another American-made knife company out and about in the world. Next thing, clip on this guy is a little different, a little interesting. What they've got here is a backspacer. You can see this doesn't actually flip around, by the way. This is a right side only clip still. But nonetheless, what you've got here is the back spacer, and then the clip kind of fits into the middle there. So there are no screws actually holding that in together. You just have the screw here and the screw here, which are going straight into the titanium. Titanium, that's a difference on the other side. Just something to keep in mind. But nonetheless, it's got an interesting clip design to it, and it's very low-key. It's very subtle. It almost looks like a pen or something like that, which makes sense, right? It is super deep carry. And by the way, this is a very easy knife to carry. I mean, if I put this guy up next to the Spyderco Delica, what we're going to see here is that this fits entirely within the outline of the Delica here, and in terms of thickness, is about the same thickness. This carries very, very well. It's very small, very subtle, and works really, really well. So it's very nice for carry, and it's also pretty lightweight as well. If I put this guy down on the scale here, we're coming in here at 2.57 or so ounces for about 3 inches of blade. Yeah, that's nice, actually. That's definitely a beautiful thing. I like that lightweight a lot. Next thing, the action on this guy is very, very good, especially with that detent tuning, which strengthened it up a little bit. What we see here, although even before it was very reliable, but I can have my wrist here, no motion at all, and it fires completely reliably. It is a very easy flipper action. It is very smooth to close. In fact, here we go. There we go. It closes very... There is no complaints about the action here. And one thing I'll say is liner locks are kind of nice in that you don't have to worry about where your fingers are on the other side, as opposed to on like a frame lock, for instance, like this Monterey Bay Knives EZC 2.0. If your finger is resting hard on this, it makes it actually harder to open the knife than if it's not. I gotta say, liner locks have some advantages there. So this is a very, very nice action. And with that detent tuning, to make that a little bit harder, really, really good. Next thing, this has a bunch of good little details here. I mean, one of the things that's very nice is take a look at the blade here. The blade actually matches, when closed, the handle exactly. You can just run your finger along here, and that's an absolutely beautiful thing. The pivot looks very nice. They've kept the same texturing kind of thing, as is the, well, Tactile Turn's sort of trademark. Yeah, I don't know if it's trademarked or not, but it's definitely, this feels like the Tactile Turn texturing, just at a little bit more of a macro level, right? Which I appreciate very, very much. They've done some other nice things. For instance, the clip is, as I said, a little bit different, very nice. This little area right here, where they've kind of broken the edge a little bit with this divot around the flipper tab area, is great, which means that when you flip the knife, you end up in this very nice, smooth area, rather than ending up between, you know, two 90-degree angles or something like that. Is it important? No, but it's a very nice little thing. The typography on the knife is very good. It's looks to be lasered in very, very well, and it's not just like a default font. You can tell that they put a lot of effort into the kerning and the typography there, which is great. The steel labeling is very subtle. This one here being in XHP steel, which is good. And, you know, the texturing. And then one other final little thing is that if you look at the screws here, these are actually all the same screw size, which is, by the way, kind of a cool optical illusion, right? Because these look a lot bigger than this, but that's just by virtue of the surroundings. But all of these are Torx T8 size screws. And that is a beautiful thing. Not only that they're using T8, which is a good size, but also that they it's uniform. Lots of nice little details here that are showing me that they're thinking this guy through. And then finally, on the good side, the blade on this is really good, right? And in fact, on any other knife, the blade here would be the great. But this has very, very thin stock. If we put this guy up next to, for instance, the Spyderco Delica, we see that the stock thickness is just about the same, if not a little bit thinner on the Rockwall. Actually, yeah, it's hard to tell exactly with the chamfer, but this is either identical to or a little bit thinner than the Delica here, and that's a beautiful thing, because that means this slices like crazy, especially when you put in a beautiful thin grind like this. The very tip of this knife is deliciously thin. The grind on this is so slicey. This cuts like crazy. And I really appreciate that. This cuts like a laser. And more, I mean, we are still recovering from the era of overbuilt, and honestly, it's nice to see this. The steel on the blade here is CTS XHP, although it's worth noting that the new ones coming off the line are now going to be in 20 CV. Which is, frankly, I would say a little bit of an improvement. I like 20 CV a little bit more than XHP, but it is a really, really nice knife with a really nice grind and a nice swedge on it, too, which is kind of worth noting up here. Just really serves to, you know, tighten that taper a little bit more at the end. Just really, really nice, as well as a very nice sharpening choil here to make sure you can keep this guy. Oh, man, I love this blade. This blade cuts like crazy, and since that is the main thing that a knife is supposed to do, that, damn it, that is good. So, to me, at least, all of that is the good here, is that this is got a really nice blade, nice details, solid action. It is super compact for carry with an interesting clip, and it is made here in the States. And the great side to me, this is a little bit ephemeral. You're welcome to replace this with the blade if you prefer, but to me, what's really great about this is their first damn knife, and they did it this well, right? I will very often be relatively tight-lipped towards makers, but when I first got this guy in the mail, I immediately I spent some time with it, but I immediately contacted Tactile Turn and just said, holy crap, guys, because I was honestly not expecting it to go this well. When people do their very first knife, very often there were predictable flaws. There were little details. There were little issues that are missing, problems, that kind of thing. Nope, they just stepped up to the plate, called their shot, and hit it out of the park. It was absolutely amazing, with a really solid design, solid execution, solid action, amazing grind, just generally overall great work. And I gotta say, that is really, really impressive, right? I am not a knife maker, but if I were to sit down and try and design a knife right now, it would be an absolute train wreck. And so I'm super sympathetic to somebody who's just sitting down to design their first knife, and if this is the very first thing they did, Oh my God, this is good. This is absolutely amazing. And they deserve an immense amount of credit for their very first effort being this damn good. And it makes us wonder what the next effort's going to be like. And holy cow, I'm excited. So, to me at least, what's great here, although for many people, functionally speaking, could be the blade, the fact that this is their very first effort. Oh man, are they good at this? So anyways, to me, that's what's great. On the bad side, to start with, I got to acknowledge the knife is pricey. Certainly, this is $300, and that's if you just think about what's on the table here, that's a little bit pricey. You can definitely get this much knife and a little bit more for that if you're willing to go with overseas made. But the thing is, at the same time, this is really well done, right? There's nothing I can point to here that's like, oh, you cut a corner, or oh, you screwed that up, right? There's nothing really wrong with how this knife is made, so I don't have a problem with this price, and many, myself included, are happy to pay a little bit more to support a company, in my case, from my home country, but who we also know is treating their people well. I'm okay with it. Is it the cheapest thing ever? No. You can get more value elsewhere, but at the same time, this is really well done, and I don't see a problem with it. So it's pricey, certainly, but I don't think it's a problem. Speaking of things I don't really think is a problem, one of the common comment that I've been getting from people is that the design is a little bit middle of the road, right? You look at this, or you look at knife in the dictionary, and it looks not so far different from this, right? But the thing is, it's that way, I think, because it works, right? And especially, from this angle, yeah, it looks a little bit middle of the road. From this angle, not so much, because not that many knives are using these super slicey, thin sorts of things. A grind like this, a blade like this, is not middle of the road at all. And in a modern knife market that is still sort of shedding the thickness sins of the overbuilt fad, this is not middle of the road at all. So it may be a little bit boring on this dimension, but I don't feel like it's boring on this one. And I think this is this is the dimension that counts a little bit more for a daily cutting sort of thing. And so I'm not particularly bothered by it. In terms of more legitimate critiques here, one of the things is that the screw's a little bit weird here. This guy is sort of in carefully. This guy feels like it's falling off the edge of things. They've done some good chamfers here to make sure that this isn't actually sharp or anything like that, but this screw positioning just feels a little bit like, oh, it ended up there, didn't it? Weird. Not the end of the world. It's a nitpick, certainly, but you know what? It's a little strange. The other thing that's worth noting is that the screws here are going directly into the tie on the other side, rather than doing a Chicago screw style thing. Makes the back of this knife really clean looking, but at the same time, that does mean that if you over tighten this screw, you could strip out the tie, and then you need a new knife, and that's not a beautiful thing. Next thing, the backspacer on this guy does not particularly match. The reason for that is that apparently the backspacer is steel. It's a different material, and it makes sense from a balance perspective, but at the same time, it doesn't have the same luster, it doesn't have the same look and feel as the tie on the rest of the guy. So there is that. Next thing, the clip on this guy is good, actually, and most of the time it works fine. It could just maybe use a little bit more ramp on the front, and it could also use that ramp to be kind of flattened off at the end. Here's a good example of that. This is the Pocketknife's Malibu, which is another comparable sort of thing, but what we see here is that not only do you have a little bit more ramp, but the ramp actually flattens off at the top there, which is just an ergonomic help. Is this bad? No, this is a nitpick, but they could get a little bit higher off there, because if you've got very thick pants, this isn't going to want to go into them, right? Next thing, and this is getting to be more of a problem, is that this is using a loose bearing pivot. What I mean by that is you take this guy apart and balls go everywhere, right? A bunch of little tiny ceramic balls. It's not the end of the world, but it was a little bit of a surprise to me. It was a surprise to me. And so that's definitely not ideal, and I kind of hope that they're able to find a captive bearing solution that'll work well for them in the future. Then finally, on the bad side, the ergos, and by the way, this isn't bad, this is just something, it's the thing I like least. The ergos could be tweaked a little bit. The biggest issue for me is actually the corners of the clip here are a little bit on the sharp side. I don't know exactly how they would deal with that or not, and it's not the end of the world, right? I've got knives in my collection that are much less comfortable to carry than this guy, but it definitely does press into the hands a little bit there. And then the other thing is I feel like I'm reasonably far away from the blade given the flipper tab here. It almost makes me think about, God, could they do a thumb stud variant of this? That might be freaking fire, right? If they did that right. And so, the flipper tab keeps you a little bit further away from the blade than I might like. And then coupled with this little bit, ergos on this are not bad by any stretch. I got a nitpick here because at this price I got a nitpick, but at the same time, they could definitely be improved a little bit there. So to me, all of that is the bad. Is that the ergos could be tweaked a little bit. The loose bearings are a little frustrating. The clip could maybe use a bit more RAM. Backspace, it doesn't match. Screw positioning's a little weird. The design is a little middle of the road, but like I said, only on this dimension, not on this one. And $300 is a little pricey, but it's made in the States and really done well. On the ugly front, there's nothing ugly here. So let's go to the final conclusion, which is that this is good. This is freaking solid. It's solid as a rock wall, right? This is made in the States, which is a beautiful thing for me. It's got a nice clip, compact carry. It's got solid action, great details, a nice blade, and the fact that all of this is their very first go is like, okay, damn. I mean, the price is not trivial, although I think they've earned it, particularly in the 20CV variants. It's middle of the road in style, if not in thickness. There are a couple of nitpicks. The clip could use a little more ramp. The bearings are a little loose, and the ergos definitely have a little bit of room for improvement, but overall, damn, this is good, right? The very worst thing you can say about this knife, I think, is that it has a lot of competition, right? And, you know, I think it's because, well, the knife is in a basic functional sort of category, but some of the competitors that you might want to think about here are, if you're willing to go overseas, the quiet carry waypoint here is actually the one that most people brought up as a like, oh wow, these look similar. I don't think they look that similar in practice. The waypoint is actually larger and carries markedly larger than this guy does. But nonetheless, this guy is about the same price point. It is Vanax steel, though, so it's a completely rust-proof knife overall, but it is also made overseas, so that can definitely be a thing. The Monterey Bay Knives EZC series, this here is the 2.0. But the 1.5 is another option. It kind of feels like it scratches a similar itch of a very carryable, compact sort of thing. Again, these are going to be overseas made, but, you know, they're definitely an option. Have a similar feeling of kind of utility, right? In terms of made in the States one, of course, you've got the... which, of course, I didn't bring over. The Chris Reeve Knives Small Shabazz is in this sort of a size range. It's going to be a little bit pricier, right? At $375, and this one here is fancier still. But nonetheless, what we see here is very similar in terms of size, just a little bit nicer, and honestly, I might go with the Tactile just because I really like a slicey blade there. And then the TRM Neutron and Atom, of course. The Neutron, come here, Neutron. The moment wearing a fancy pair of scales from Madge Anderson. But anyways, the DRM Neutron is another knife that's actually, it makes this guy look a little bit small, right? But it's a similar kind of size and very, very similar slicey blade, which is a beautiful thing. Then, of course, like the ProTech Malibu is maybe the other one. But look, honestly, I present all these competitors because those are some really serious competitors, right? Each one of those is a gem in its own right? All of those are knives from my personal collection. And this guy has earned its place among all of those as being a really nice Shabazz alternative that is cheaper than the Shabazz, right? As being something that is feeling a little bit fancier, for instance, than the Neutron in the G10 and whatnot. As something that is, you know, it's just really, really freaking good, right? I'm Tony over at Everyday Commentary. I wrote my review and then I read his just because I was curious what he had to say. Gave it a perfect score, and at some level, yep, I get it, 100%. I don't do that around these parts, but what I've got here are mostly nitpicks, and for a company to do this on their first go is just really good. So predictably, as you probably figured out, this is a gem. It's something that I'm going to be recommending very regularly to people who want something that's a little bit higher end, maybe a little bit on the smaller side, and want something that is slicey like crazy. Because that's one of the things that's not as common right now, especially in the US-made knife game, is, you know, super duper slicey. That's a beautiful thing, right? And especially on the higher end, full titanium sort of approach, really, really good. So it's something I'm going to recommend regularly. It represents the birth of another great American knife maker. And because, you know, if this is design number 1, what's design number 2 going to look like? Holy crap. So overall, my feelings here are well done, Tactile Knife. And if you like the design and you want something slicey and you're willing to pay that cost, then I wouldn't turn one of these guys down. You might go tactile over tactical, right? There shouldn't be a rock wall separating you from buying this knife. Anyways, I'm going to go on ahead and stop. Hope this has been interesting to you, and have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. And I hope you found this review groovy. Okay, bye now.